When I say the word injustice, what comes to mind? I'm probably going to start with just some definitions. So, justice simply means something is not right, fair, or equal. Injustice is just the opposite of that. So, when we talk about injustice, we're talking about the things in our world that are not right, fair, or they're unequal. But you didn't really need me to define that, did you? No, of course not. For most of us, something came to mind the minute you heard the word injustice. Maybe it was something big, global, like human trafficking, or global poverty, or world hunger. Or maybe you've made it to the side of TikTok that over time has helped you see an injustice you've never experienced. What I'm getting at is something comes to mind for all of us. In fact, it's one of the things I really love and admire about your generation. You guys, maybe more than any generation in history, are aware of injustices happening in our world. The real question we all face is not, does injustice exist? It's, why doesn't somebody do something about it? That's the question we're going to be wrestling with for the next few weeks during this series. What does that look like? Whose job is it? And whose job is it to do something about injustice? We aren't the first to have this problem. In fact, Jesus made a habit of pointing out a lot of things people hadn't seen before. One of the questions people asked Jesus a lot was, who is cool with you? Or who isn't? And I'm sure that, it wasn't exactly said like that, but Jesus did in many conversations answer with a parable to this question. So again, the question presented to Jesus was, who's cool with you? Who's in good standing with you? Who's on the right side and who's on the wrong side? And in this story, the sheep are on the right or the righteous side and the goats are not. Listen to what he had to say about the goats. In this story, Jesus distinguishes between the righteous and the unrighteous, the good guys and the bad guys. In other words, people who need the most help, feel the most pain, or get the worst treatment. Now, that may seem a little bit extreme. Is Jesus really this mad because they didn't give someone some water? I mean, listen to the level of shock that the goats expressed in their response to the king. When did we not see you? When did we not clothe you or feed you or give you water? As if they're saying, not me, I would never do that. He hadn't physically been hungry or thirsty or in prison, but he wanted to make a point. When you don't see those who need your help, you're not just missing out on seeing injustice. When we don't see it, Jesus takes personal offense as if we don't see him. You're missing out on part of what it means to follow Jesus himself. Remember, this is a story about who is cool with Jesus and who isn't. And he is very clear about the answer. His people are people who see and act when it comes to injustice. Now, I'm not saying that's what it takes to start a relationship with Jesus. But I am saying if you get to know him, you'll see that Jesus always cares about injustice, always speaks up for others, and always fights for what's right. Before you do something about injustice, you have to see it first. That's where we need to start. We need to be able to look around and see what's happening. We need to be able to notice the injustices in our daily, ordinary world. We all have room to grow in this, so here are 3 simple things we can do together. First one is get close enough to see. How do we do this? Well, there are a few things we can do for starters. We can pray that God would help us see the way he sees. Then spend some time with people who are different than us. It doesn't come naturally to any of us. We naturally gravitate towards people who are like us. In order to see what's going on in the world, you have to get to know people in the world, not just in your circle. So get close enough to see. Put yourself on a path to interact with different people. These are all ways to get close enough to other people in order to see the world from someone else's eyes. The second thing is be curious enough to listen. The quickest way to see injustice is to listen to people who are experiencing it. When someone tells you they're experiencing some sort of injustice, listen. And don't just listen, but try to learn. Try to imagine yourself in their shoes. Think about what they're saying And here's a heads up, it will make you uncomfortable, especially if it's kind of injustice you've never experienced, or worse, the kind you didn't realize you were participating in. So this is gonna be hard to do, but it's a good sign when bad things make you uncomfortable. It means you're beginning to see things in a way that God sees them. So keep listening and try to learn when you hear about injustices. The third thing is be courageous enough to name it. That means if it's wrong, say it's wrong. If it's unfair, call it that. When you see injustice around you or even in you, be courageous enough to call it what it is. Identifying injustices takes away some of its power because we can't change what isn't seen or acknowledged or talked about. This may be the hardest part for you, and it may be risky, but it's important because once we name injustice, we also feel ownership and responsibility to do something about that. Listen, so much of following Jesus is learning to see, think, and live in a way that is not natural to us. One of the things that I love about this generation is that so many of you actually see and care about injustice more than the previous generations. Here's what I'm getting at. You can be the generation to do something in areas where it has seemed impossible in the past. But the first step to doing something is seeing it and helping others see it too. So invite a friend to Student Impact on March 20th, and this is where we'll go into a community that needs help, and God has blessed us with the opportunity to fill this need. As you head out, I want you to think about this quote from Maya Angelou, a famous writer who wrote about injustice often. And she said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." That's what this series is about. Seeing better so that we can know better and ultimately do better.